This is The Storied Outdoors, a podcast somewhere between Lewis and Tolkien and Lewis and Clark, finding clarity in the stories we tell and the adventures that shape us. Welcome to The Storied Outdoors. My name is Brad Hill, and I'm joined as always by my good friend and co-host Brian Gill. We welcome today Ben Meadows and George Constantine from Dorsal Outdoors, a crew of lifelong buddies from Alabama who just couldn't put a good story down. These guys, man, insanely talented at crafting films about the outdoor experience, people, the places, and the pursuits. From the time Ben and George got stranded on an uninhabited island, I love this video, while they're trying to catch bonefish, or the time Dan dropped into 400 feeding tuna and left with only a headache, or especially a time where every time they took what they had. And I love this about you guys. They took what you have, you make the best out of it, and you venture as far as you can go. This is why I enjoy you guys' films, is the way you tell stories. You guys have published stuff from Colombia, Alabama, Mexico, Louisiana, everywhere adventure is found. Ever since we met you guys, man, we have felt like you're our tribe, our people, as we say sometimes, the kind of folks that we hoped to have conversations with on this podcast. So it's been a long time coming, and we're glad to have you guys. Thanks for joining us tonight, guys.
Thanks for having us, y'all. This is gonna be fun.
Man, I feel like this is one of those conversations, Brad, that could last a long time.
Absolutely.
We were talking about it before we started recording about how, we really wish we were in front of a campfire on this one. We'll just pretend like this is our digital campfire, as we say.
Digital campfire.
All right. So George, you're in advertising, Ben, you're in higher ed. You guys have very different backgrounds, but it seems like at the root of what you do, you guys are storytellers, and fine ones at that. And so where did that love of story and storytelling come from? Was there someone influential in your life that helped spark this, or is it upbringing? Kind of give us some little insight into where this love of storytelling came from.
Ben, I can let you take that one, but I need you to fix your collar first. Clean yourself up.
But the thing is if I keep the collar out, it starts hitting the Apple mic.
Video guys are like, come on, man.
This is my hack. Look. Hey, if a bunch of people want to trash the YouTube comments, that's what we call engagement, baby. That's engagement.
Right.
That's a great. Hey, yeah. If you don't know what we're talking about, swing over to our YouTube page and.
That's absolutely.
Check out Ben's awful collar and dunk on it. Like, hey, that's a guy that looks like he likes to fly fish for ladyfish. It shows.
He wasn't kidding when he said trout bum.
He's a trashy man. Yeah, George, I'll start with some of the storytelling stuff and you chime in. Cool. It's funny. Only myself could dunk on storytelling and tell you how much I love it. You got to be careful with storytelling. It is at its core an omission of details so that a logical narrative can be spun. But let me do that on my own. I think growing up around my grandmother's table in Mississippi and listen to her spin yarns with her friends, much to my dad's, disappointment, I wanted to hang out with a bunch of old ladies as they spun stories, and they all would drink rock gut scotch and mix it with water and ice, and I would sit there with a Coca-Cola, the good kind that was made with sugar,
and in a glass
and just
bottle. I'm hoping.
My grandma was cheap. It was a can. But listen to them talk and then follow them outside for their smoke break and the talk. So I think that's where the storytelling stuff came from on both sides, just grandparents passing it down. But for us at the Dorsal, I think and George and I can talk a little bit about origin because we love telling that story. But I think as we started to go on trips together, we realized that the week of doing the trip or whatever it was chaotic and crazy and fun, but the dreaming about it, the anticipation, and then just retelling the stories about what we had seen and experienced, that was just something we loved, and that's where the films vaulted themselves. It was let's take some pictures so we can remember this. And so little power shot cameras that were like this. And then one year I went really, really big and got secondhand DSLR on eBay. And then we ended up in Colombia. And so I started video recording and maxing out like 16 gigabyte, like, SD cards and thinking I was like the Hollywood movie. I was like, where am I gonna do all this data? But then we would come back and be like, oh my gosh, do you remember seeing that? Or you remember seeing that? And I just think that just naturally led to us then picking up films on telling the stories of what we saw and what we loved. And so yeah, that again, you got to be careful with storytellers because we're going to omit a lot of details. But I would take you from my Nana's table in Jackson, Mississippi, all the way to today of just kind of telling people what you saw and that fired up connection of like, man, do you remember this? And George and I've had the blessing of doing this almost for 2 decades just because we're a little bent out of shape.
Man, I love the thought of sitting around listening to your grandmother, granddad, grandparents talk. I mean, that's part of my childhood too. I mean, that's this love of just the cadence, the sitting on the porch, rocking chairs. I mean, in between the long pauses, and then there's this, they drop some kind of a funny line or something like that. I mean, that whole experience is so, man, it's those are good memories, man. And for that to be part of your story, that's pretty awesome. I love that. I also love the fact that your grandmother's over there drinking scotch and water, and yeah,
bad scotch. I
that's
mean, bad scotch.
He says.
Like she kept it under the sink next to like the Lysol. Like let's be real, what we're talking
She
about.
also
which one do
used it
we
on
which
the-
one do we draw? Which one do we go for to clean?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought after she passed, my brother and I were like, should we like have a drink of Clooney in her memory? And my dad cut in and he was like, good grief, save yourself. No, like, like don't do that to yourself.
Yeah, he's like, I've already tried it, son. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, George, I'll pass it to you, man. Storytelling, where's it come from?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think, going on these trips, like you mentioned, it's been almost 2 decades now, which is crazy. But with that was not much technology in our hands, I think. And, this is before our phones even did much video recording of anything. So if we were going to capture any of the moments, it was going to be with a camera. And if that camera came, it was going to be a digital camera, most likely. So I think some of the super early stuff we shot on, just straight up those little point and shoot digital cameras like Ben was talking about, or a fancy underwater one that was, had a little housing with it. So, we get some random stuff on some of these early trips, some cool stuff, some fish, going crazy and some of that kind of, cool stuff you want to see. But then we get back and we're like, okay, I mean, what do you do with that though? There's no story here. It's just a quick clip of some fish jumping on a kind of crappy camera, and it's what are we gonna do with this? So I think it kind of naturally evolved with the technology, with us coming back with cool pictures, some small video stuff here and there, and then we're like, okay, what if we actually tried to kind of document this whole entire trip and see what would happen if we did that? And it kind of evolved from there, and then realize, hey, fish stuff's cool, but if you don't have a cool story to go with it, that means something. What does it really mean? So I think that's how it evolved for us from what I saw.
Yeah, I love that. I love the whole, you've got this beautiful footage, you got all this great scenery, you got this all these videos, but like you said, the story is what you're telling. I mean, it's not like you're just doing some, landscape videography or something like that. I mean, this is the story, and that's the backdrop of what you're trying to tell. I mean, that to me is what makes what you guys do at Dorsal so great.
Appreciate it, man. I think an interesting iteration that happened was, we had a really just amazingly lucky time a couple years ago filming tarpon on poppers. And so George got to tell that story. And I remember there was some early pushback and we were like, look, this is a fish porn reel. Like let's just let fish jump and eat poppers and that kind of stuff. And like I'm a pretty, I don't know, I'll just confess, I'm a pretty passive guy. Like I don't like starting crap. That's just not my vibe. But that was one of the first times I put my foot down. I'm like, I don't do digital slideshows. That's not what we're about. George has a story to tell, and we're telling it. And we're not lopping off 3 minutes off the front end and 1 minute off the back end because we just want to see fish go boom. That's just not who we are. To me, it robs all the joy. Like all we did. because it wasn't like the thing that we tried to sell in that story, and George so eloquently said is like, look, for 16 years, this stuff has always gone sideways. It's always like we have always gotten the raw deal because we're, sometimes incompetent, let's be real. But a lot of times, like things just don't go our way. And we had one time that it did, and we want to tell people how thankful and how exciting and how marvelous and how lucky we were paired with Nick Dembo to make that happen. And to reduce that and say that there's not a story there, I mean, it just rubbed me all different types of ways. And so anyways, we put our foot down and it got to go as is. But yeah, I mean that you're speaking our language of like I think you can quibble on storytelling techniques and people's preferred storytelling ways and all that kind of stuff. But at its core, like if I'm just gonna do a footage dump, like why not just upload that to I don't know, pick your social media app and walk away. Like
Right.
that's not what we're really interested in. So
Yeah.
yeah, man, storytelling is kind of core.
Yeah, I know I'm going to double click here on this part of the conversation, Brian, because I find it really interesting. There's a dance that you guys do when you guys are working, because sometimes you're working with companies that are helping like put some money towards it, and so you're working with a bunch of different people nowadays. So you got to do a little dance, like you're saying. You had to put your foot down because we want to tell this story and stay true to who you are, and because you knew like how important story was and how it connects. Why do you think like these films, um, the Fly Fishing Film Festival, these stories that are written on a canvas of fly fishing connect so well with people that that they just come back to them and watch them over and over on a YouTube? Are they really? What is it about? I don't know. What is it? There's a beauty in fly fishing, yeah, I think, but it is a great canvas for storytelling. We've experienced that ourselves. But why does that connect with people so much?
I mean, I'm just gonna giggle and say it does. The funny part is, as a filmmaker, George and I rarely hear positive feedback. We get plenty of static and yeah-yeahs about stuff. Um, Positive feedback is rare. Um, and we'll talk about it later, I'm sure. But he and I shot a film with Danielle Davidson and Mary Beth Meeks about catching triple tail on the Alabama
Yeah.
Bay, Mobile Bay, your stomping grounds, man. And someone actually texted me from an F3T event and was like, "Hey, I watched this and this was so good." And I was like, I literally like all caps and I was like, "Man, you don't know how much that means to me because that's probably the last time we're gonna hear anything about it." There is this really funny thing about these films is we actually don't receive a lot of feedback. We see
Huh.
a lot of negative feedback on the front end of when we're trying to tighten it up and make a great story, and that negative feedback's awesome. You have to have it. But when people come back and watch it again and again, that's news to me. That's awesome. That makes me excited. But that's not something I'm aware of. So cool. That makes my day.
Yeah, I mean, I only add that is I think the goal is to try to make it as relatable as possible. I think it's very hard to have yourself on camera or interview somebody and be like, all right, talk about this really cool thing, but don't make it sound like you're this awesome hero for going to do it, at the same time. But then again, make it cool so it's exciting. It's just that little dance there where you gotta kind of be humble about it because it's like, in the end of the day, you're catching a fish. You're not, a hero here, right? But when you have a good story to tell and it's relatable and it's like, hey, I mean, we just had a whole film about catching, one fish. It's like, all right, that's relatable. I get it. You have failures and you succeed eventually. But I think that's kind of the dance we try to make is don't try to shed too many roses on yourself because in the end of the day, you're not that cool, but you got a good story to tell and hopefully people can relate to it.
Yeah, yeah, I like that, and I really, and I don't know who else does it. I know I've certainly gone back and watched a couple of you guys' stuff over, a couple of different times because I see different things, and I need to do that a couple of times personally. That's just me personally. I really enjoy it, and sometimes I just want to see a tarpon explode on a popper, but
That's right.
but whatever.
We do too. Let's be honest.
Let's be real.
We in the editing bay, that was the most fun of being like, "Yep, I'm gonna rewatch that another time just for fun."
Yeah, for sure.
I know I've watched The Slam That Saves several times. I mean, that's just one of my favorites.
Well, and that one, obviously, for many reasons, was very special, right? To, and I don't want to sound like I'm kind of like groveling here, but it really was an honor to
Hmm.
just follow Matt Lewis and MB around the state, to document what makes Alabama just a gem. I mean, I don't want to speak for George, but I felt an enormous amount of pressure, um, not only shooting it, but editing it, because I knew that, if we did this right, it would inspire and encourage people, but it also was a reflection of the state. So there was just a lot of sequences that, I mean, I can't tell you how many terabytes of footage of poppers floating downstream and nothing happening we have. Just, I mean, we just sold out. I told George, I was like, we're burning hard drives and I don't care. Like, we've got to get, like, if Dr. Matt Lewis says that what makes red eye bass fly fishing the best is the eat, then we're gonna get the eat. And and I mean, that's the thing. There's some really terrible math to getting eat footage.
Hmm.
For every eat footage you see on screen, there are 12 um, videos of it out of focus. There's 12 with it not in frame. There are 40 sitting on top of that where we didn't press the trigger at the right time. And then, like I said, there's 2,000 where fish didn't bite a popper. It was a labor of love, and we loved it. Um, but we just, I don't know. We felt like we had to do it. Like, you couldn't be like, well, here's red-eyed bass and we caught them on streamers. Like, that's not what it's about, and that's not what our characters were about. And so, um, yeah,
Great story.
I'm glad y'all loved the film.
Well,
That one was probably the highest pressure film I've ever felt under my skin, was just because
I
it's our
think,
home state and I wanted to do it justice.
yeah, and I mean, speaking to that, I mean, it's not like there's not going to be anybody watching that film. I mean, you talk about fly fishing in Alabama, and you talk about red eye. I mean, one of the things that Brad and I have really learned over the last 5 or so years is just this incredible community among Alabama fly fishermen and women. And it's just, I mean, it was almost one of those things like, yeah, the pressure's on, but hey, this film needed to be made. Like, it was like the state of Alabama needed this film. And I'm not trying to overstate it. I mean, this is just from a perspective of somebody in that community. I think the Alabama community needed that to kind of solidify, hey, this is legit. This community is real. And it's got great people like Matt and Mary Beth
Hmm.
and the guys from Dorsal.
I don't think we realized the scale of how big that community really was. I mean, truthfully speaking, me and Ben kind of grew up more in the largemouth bass kind of side of things, and this red
Me
eye
too.
stuff was something pretty,
You can
novel
say it
for
out
us.
loud, George. We spin fished.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
spin fished. Like, say it. I know.
Hey, I
I
always thought that
know.
red eye were just little baby largemouth.
That's right. Little rock bass.
Oh my
But
gosh,
yeah,
sacrilege.
I know. Matt Lewis is going to burn us at the stake for this, George.
that's
It'd be all
right.
right. He's in
No, but it
Tennessee.
was
Hey,
cool to
he's the
see.
one who's educated us on this stuff. So I mean, I
That's
appreciate
true.
Matt.
Yep.
To be educated means you didn't know it.
That's
So
it.
That's right.
Ignorance is
come
not
on.
just a sign of intelligence or not a lack of intelligence. It's just you didn't know.
I didn't know.
Doc Louie. That's right.
That's funny.
Yeah, but it was cool to see everybody come together and, like you said, the scale of that community. I think a lot of people talked about it and did the same things, but to get everybody together at an event like that and kind of just talk and see that film come together was super cool. So it was a rewarding one for sure. But like Ben said, pretty high pressure trying to make that happen, and only a few small windows of actually being able to get out there with everybody.
Oh gosh, I can't imagine the scheduling nightmare that was. You guys, you've devoted your films to capturing these adventures all over the place, chasing fish with fly rods specifically. I know that presents lots of challenges, but what are some of the things you guys have learned? This big kind of big picture stuff, all the projects put together. What are some of the things you guys have learned in these pursuits? Maybe some particular ways you feel like you've been shaped by this process of making films.
Hmm, that's a good one. It is a rejection heavy corner of the world.
Mm.
Um, and I think early on we took people's opinions as honest revelation of the truth. in reality, that was just opinions.
Mm.
We kind of joked about it earlier. George was like, "We got to make it attainable," and so we made an attainable film. And people were like, "Ugh, but it's not ambitious enough." We make something ambitious. They're like, "Oh, well, who can ever do that?" And you kind of ping pong. And I'm not saying that we were like capitulating to whatever people wanted, but like at the end of the day, you can be like all true to yourself and make a film that only you want to watch because it's, of ladyfish on a sandbar, and I'm throwing myself under the bus there. They're just to do a good film is to share joy with others.
Yeah.
It's to share a story that resonates with others, and so that means you got to put other people first. Um, and it was really confusing early on to figure out good feedback from nasty feedback from how really people felt and what people wanted to see and the stories we wanted to tell. So I think in a very boring way that shaped, and again, I don't want to speak for George here, but for me, I've become a little more resolute in the things that I think are worth telling, stories that I
Mm.
think are interesting, because we're all different and we see different things in different stories. And so, um, yeah, I mean, I knew this thing was going to be rejection heavy. I mean, Brian, you mentioned, being in higher ed, that's my life is rejection. And so filmmaking just added, doubled down. It's like taking a double keg stand of battery acid, I feel like sometimes. Um, because it's just rejection wherever you look, whether it's you're trying to get funding to do something and people are like, nobody wants to see that, or
Mhm.
you feel like you're answering the call where people are like, hey, this needs to be shot in the outdoor space, and you do it, and everybody's like, no. So I think for me, we've gotten a little more resolute. I don't know, George, would you say we've gotten bolder in the fact of like, this is cool, we're shooting it. And um since we developed our own channels, and I wouldn't say they're big or glorious or really that big of a megaphone, but it allows us to say, hey, this is a cool story, we're going to shoot it, and if it lands nowhere else, we're proud of it. And I know that's where people say, oh, you should start there. That's morally where you should start. But I'm like, nobody does that. Like no one just that's coming out bold, swinging, and rude because the path for great filmmaking. I don't think that's real. So I think we've adapted, and as we've adapted, we kind of learned the stories that we think matter.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. And I think there's that, initial early stage kind of Venn diagram of some sort of, what you want to tell and what people want to hear, and finding that space in the middle where, like you said, if there's people involved with the film, what they want to see, if there's people looking at the film, what they want to see, and make it exciting. But then end of the day, it's like, hey, this is a story that we want to tell. We think it's cool. We shot it. So at the end of the day, we could put it somewhere. And if it gets some eyeballs, great. If not, like, it'll be okay. It's not going to be the end of the world. So taking that pressure off of trying to please everybody and just
Mhm.
tell a story that is true and honest and hopefully resonates with folks, I think was something that we started moving a lot more towards, like Ben said, here recently. So that's been cool to see that develop.
Yeah, George, I don't know if you want to put a pin in it, but it's like I think when we shot Dan's Pain, like so here's the backstory on that film. We went to Colombia because there's this really cool sardine migration that we wanted to document. We'd seen a couple people take attempts at it. We were going to pair up with these really elite filmmakers from Knoxville who were down to roll, and then the sardine school never showed up. We doubled down 2 years later. We're like, okay, we're gonna do it this time. We got the moons, we got everything. We're gonna make it this school show up. And of course, that's not how nature works. And there's just this sequence where that you see in Dan's Pain where the poor guy like is approaching a school of 400 tuna that are breaching everywhere, and just he basically puts the fly the one place where you don't want it, in the back of your head. And I came back and I just was trying to be funny on our group thread, and made a commercial about see Dan cast, see Dan hook himself in the back of the head with this like funky groove in the background because Dan likes a good funky track. And Dan called me, he goes, dude, I've never laughed that hard. We should make a film about it. And I was like, you want me to throw you under the bus via film? And he's like, absolutely. And so I made him a little mini cut and I called it Dan's Pain. Because he always talks about how at the end of every fishing trip, Dan doesn't catch anything. He goes, you know what? But I'm ready to get hurt again. He always said, he's like, I'm ready to get hurt again. And
Oh
I pitched
man.
it to the F3T and I was like, look, I have a film about a guy who can't catch a fish. And I know that you want to hang up right now, but hear me out. I have really good fishing footage. We've got tuna jumping in slow-mo. We've got it all, but it's going to be a failure film. And they were, I don't know, there was a very lucky break because they were like, yes, yes to all of this. And I think why I put a pin in that is because I think from that point on, George and I were like, okay, we can try stuff that's our way of doing things, whether it's a fail film, whether it's a funny film, whether we're trying to do some more resonant, joy-filled films, as you saw with The Slime That Saves. But we can just tell the stories. We have that, I guess, the confidence that we can tell the stories we want to tell, rather than, like I said, when you're getting rejected left and right, you're like, well, there's something wrong with me. And I think we've just kind of learned a little bit, like, no, like it's just part of growing.
Mm.
And it's that adaptability and flexibility I think we've learned too, because full disclosure, we went into that film, I think we were going to call it like Grand Slam or something. The whole idea was to catch a roosterfish, a sailfish, and a tarpon all on a fly in the same day in Colombia.
You're hurting me, George, because I'm like,
Did
oh my
not
gosh.
catch
Because
single
again,
one
talk
of
about
those
failure. Like we're
species
just like, oh
on
my
the
gosh,
fly.
like we literally got none of those because we suck so bad.
Yeah, and
Golly.
then we got our buddy failure at it, and that became the film. So talk about adaptability.
Right, because in the moment we're like, good grief, Dan can't even catch a tuna, and they're jumping in the air trying to like, they're one of them hit the boat, like
Wow.
they're trying to jump in people, and we couldn't catch one. And I'm like, guys, this is why we can't make fishing films. And I think the funny part is like, if you want to be like really like clever, is like, no, that's the very reason we can make fishing films, is because when those moments we're like, you know what, let's throw it out there. Hey Dan, can we spoof you for an entire film?
Oh man, gosh, I love hearing that backstory. I know nobody ever goes out to think, oh, let me get skunked so I can make a good film about it. You know, that's
Well,
not how.
and that's a great point. I think,
Sign
and
me up.
Yeah, right.
I've kind of started around this. I see sometimes in the outdoors, folks are like, yeah, I'm writing a script. And I'm like, that's awesome. We've
Good.
never been able to do that. Any script we take, and I'm talking like even like an Apple Notes, like this is what we're here to do. It's almost like we roll out on like of the boat and Mother Nature's like, that's cute. That's really cute. That's not gonna happen. Yeah, get out of here with that trash.
So
Um,
knowing all that, so what makes a good story? Like give us I know that there's an arc, I mean, from a writing background, I know what I feel like makes a good story, but I'd love to hear from you guys. Like, what does that look like? You have this footage. It's not what you started out with, but you also come away with this really great story. Walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I think, and Ben, again, he's more the mastermind around putting the pieces together. I think sometimes I'm the one that's like, hey, could we add this or do this? Wouldn't this be really cool? If we
That
put
would be
some
cool.
crazy, like romantic, poetic thing in there. And he's like, what do you, this is very left base here. What are we doing? Okay,
sir,
sorry,
this is a
that'd be a cool
Wendy's.
idea. But no, I think, having that adaptability was one big thing for us, coming back with something and saying like, hey, what do we get, right? And then throwing around some ideas of saying what would make a cool story here, what would be exciting, what would be something we could actually turn around and build out of this, and then be able to make tweaks from there. But I don't know. For me, again, as Ben was saying, it's like we go in with this good idea, this great plot that we want to lay out, have it all just this nice little guideline for us, and it just seems to never go that way. So being able to adapt and then make something out of it has almost been the biggest thing that I've learned over the last few years, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, even just like piggybacking off George on adaptability there. When we shot the Holy Well, we actually went in for a spoof film. That's the funny part. It's funny how it's always this duality. Like, so we went in trying to, and I hope it doesn't make us out to sound like jerks, but like, there's this idea that the only good saltwater films come from like the Seychelles, and that's like a $30,000 price tag per angler. And so we wanted to
Wow.
spoof like we finally, the dorsal crew finally made it, and then like zoom out and we're actually on a beach in Mexico. Like we had we even were gonna buy the leggings and like do the whole do up just to like look the part of the Seychelles, and honestly to make fun of ourselves. Like it was not to, if you get to go to the Seychelles, all power to you. I'm gonna dream along with you. It's just not gonna be me. So we thought it'd be a fun little spoof. And then of course we stumbled upon magical fishing. And so at that point, I remember we were copying all the footage from that day. And I mean, I think I looked at George and Ben Fields, who we owe most of the credit for getting into filmmaking. And I looked at him, I was like, we're not shooting a spoof anymore.
Mm.
We're shooting a really cool tarpon documentary. So I think your question was what makes a great story and how does the story making come about. I think we have just gotten so pummeled by reality that we will take the story that's given to us, if that makes any sense. So like I said, we were shooting a spoof and then Nat Geo magic happens and it's like, nope, that's what we're doing now.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, it's funny, like the film we shot this year with Danielle and Mary Beth, it was actually supposed to be about black drum because Mary Beth thinks that's the most beautiful fish in the world, and I think that's hilarious that she thinks that. But then Danielle is a maestro of triple tails, so you adapt, and you learn a lot about a cool fishery that way. So, to try to acknowledge the honor of your question quickly, to me, a story obviously captivates you. You want to know what's happening next. For me, when we cut our films, I love to drop viewers off a cliff, metaphorically. Like with Dan's Pain, right? You put in the cinematic soundtrack and the Jurassic Park vibes. He's on an adventure. He's gonna catch it, and then you just drop viewers off the cliff and be like, "I'm sorry, y'all. This is Dan. He's not gonna catch a fish." And just I love being able to build like you're talking about a story arc. I like a nice triangle up and drop them off and then rebuild. Just because sometimes that's just like life. Like, I mean, like we talked with Dan after that sequence, and we're like, dude, because George got a tuna out of that school, and he's like, Dan, how did you do? And he's like, no, Dan, how did you do? And he's like, and my brother was one filming. He's like, I got it. I know what happened. um, so yeah, for me, I would say I love a good, I don't know if that's the right word, but I love a good triangle story where it's a nice, smooth build to the top. You know what's going to happen until we push you off and say, no, it's not going to happen that way. And then I don't find any joy of like untied knots. I do like a good resolution. I like to clean up. Dan has a line, and I don't know why all of a sudden we're just talking about Dan's Pain ad nauseum here, but I love in Dan's Pain where he talks about like if you can't find joy in catching a bluefish or a ladyfish or a speckled trout on a fly, you need to hang it up because you don't know what the joy of fly fishing is anymore. And I love that little resolution of just kind of like getting beat up, and I think in the film he's like, yeah, I just was fishing with a spin rod from that point on because I was hurting so bad. But I do think those resolutions are important to tie up loose ends and things like that. So I don't know, Brian, did I just butcher your question? You're gonna have to scrub all
No,
that out for
man.
the podcast.
No, that's awesome. I love the triangle. That's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, economics background, advertising background. What are your roles within Dorsal? Like, what is how do each of you contribute to make this really beautiful film?
So I would say like George is the chief dreamer. He's not gonna let us do anything that is safe and boring and the usual. And that is my resting place. I would without George, we would have stayed in Belize for years on end, and I would have been happy with half-pound bonefish and rum punches and never trying for anything that we've seen. And so George is constantly challenging us and pushing us for the next and newest thing, which breathes new life because you will have new stories that come out from that. And then I guess I'm kind of the commercial trip dad, pulling the details together, lassoing knuckleheads, making sure. Well, I mean, there's a couple times I just wanted to leave people and see if they could fend for themselves, but try not to leave people and making sure everyone's on the same page. But the thing that I found most refreshing and most encouraging over the past year with Dorsal is that like we have a bunch of guys. We have Dan, who's a construction engineer. We have my brother, who's in financial technology. We have Ben Fields, who is an elite cinematographer. We have our buddy Kai, who's a pharmacist. Tommy, who's an entrepreneur, and then a college buddy of mine, Alex, who's a lawyer. And at any point in time, that's a sorry, he's a prosecutor. We don't mess with him. But I say all those names because we've figured out how to find camera systems that are a little more foolproof, and everybody's a really good sport about picking up the camera. So there's a diversity of angle, there's a diversity of species, there's a diversity of experience, which allows you, again, if you're thinking about kind of flexibility, you can just tell a lot of different stories. That's why we
Yeah.
released a series around Mexico this year, is because we had it. We had stories every day that were just off the wall, like, like Dan catching a grand slam in 30 minutes. But, the probably total of the grand slam was a pound and a half. And so it's elite and ambitious. He's caught a grand slam, and oh my gosh, these are pipsqueak fish. Like, and that's just like, but it's because you've got an entire village who's committed to the cause, and they're excited to see where things are going next, and things that I think are exciting is that, like, we're kind of expanding our horizons with, like, different guys, like, saying, hey, I want to shoot this. Does this fit in dorsal? And I'm like, yeah, what doesn't? Let's be honest. Like, we want to just tell great stories. We want people to come and just have fun, just have joy, cut up with us, enjoy it. No matter if it's saltwater, red-eye bass, freshwater, black drum, redfish, whatever. Like, we just want to show the joy, the fun, the sass, the trash talking, all the above, all that makes the outdoors fun, and even trying to branch out to some hunting projects too, of, like, just, I don't know. So I'm a little bit of a tailspin there, and I apologize, but I think where George and I have led the charge on pushing this, I think our guys have felt more enabled and confident to shoot shots. I mean, there's trying to think of from this past year of when we had Hermit hitting topwater. Um, that was my brother filming the first segment, and then George on the second segment. Um,
That's cool.
Dan covered a lot of ground on the beach fishing, um, with and then when we were in, like, there's anyway, I could go on and on, but um, that's another choice, and I will say it is a conscious choice that George and I have made. There is a level of filmmaking that requires hundreds of thousands of dollars of inputs, and we have decided, and you can rent those, to be clear, but we haven't gone that way just because that would shut doors to our crew being able to um, pitch in and make these things happen. So, yeah, that's kind of, again, a kind of a Pandora's box of roles, but it just was really cool this past year when we had 4 cameras rolling in the backwoods of Mexico, and I think it showed just, the fact that we were able to put out 8 different um, episodes from it, just because cameras were rolling and great things were happening.
And what I'll add to that, because Ben is entirely too humble of a guy, and that's what makes him a good dude. But the amount of editing that he does for these films is incredible, and that's what's made these films come together. Not on top of being the trip dad, organizing things, keeping us in line. When I start drifting off too far, he's like, "Hey, we need to focus on this. We need to get this done." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. Sorry."
Come back down to earth, George.
That's right. Come on back. We can go to the South Pacific.
If we
maybe
go
next.
30 miles offshore, could we get that 1 hour of fishing?
It's possible.
It's possible. It's possible.
It's possible.
So yeah, no, again, Ben's done entirely too much he will never bring up, but he's really crushed it on editing all these films this year. And yeah, we've come a long way. And I think watching him from the first film we put together to some of the most recent ones, it's been crazy to see the development. So again, hats off to Ben for all the work he's done on his side.
Thanks, man. Thanks,
I
man.
love that there's a big team. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I like that aspect of what you guys are doing. Like, this is a group effort of storytelling, and it's a lot of fun. And the chemistry of your friendships come through in those films too. And that's as much as I enjoy, that as much as I do, a fish blow up, on a popper. Like, just seeing, like, genuine friendship, kind of lived out on film in the experience, because that's what, that's what it is that draws us to the outdoors. Is, one, we love the outdoors, but also when it's a shared experience that we've talked about often on the podcast, is it makes it all the richer for us to experience when we have, our friends around us in those experiences, and we can laugh about them and poke fun or whatever, talk trash, whatever it may be, because you're just having a great time together, experiencing, whatever it may be, whether it's tuna or little tiny fingerling trout in a tiny stream in North Georgia. Whatever those times together is so rich, and then you mix that into the outdoor space, and it makes it so relatable, and go, oh man, I want to go do that.
Yeah, we've been blessed over the years to have a very ride or die crew. I just have a lot of warm memories from this past trip. It was cheaper for us to rent like a short bus from where we flew into to where we were staying, and just like for us to just cut up for 4 hours. Um, Still realize that we're all boys at heart. We all we're men in our domains, but boys at heart and just goofing and yeah, I'm glad that comes through in the films because that's really important to me because I think the moment where we try to make our characters not who they are, um, it's not only disingenuous, but it's just that's a hard act to keep up with.
Yeah.
But instead, like just like Kai is a like he's literally ride or die Kai. I would make a t-shirt for that because he started fishing with George and I like 3 years into our trips, and he did not like fishing. He just pretended because he loved the camaraderie. And then he got then he has God's blessed luck. The dude, the first saltwater fish he ever caught was a 170-pound tarpon. Like it's not real what he does. One time George was fishing for 6 hours in Colombia. Kai wakes up from a nap and hooks a rooster fish. Like he does this all the time. But like again,
Hate that guy.
yeah, he is that guy.
Stop trying so hard, man.
Yeah, he's like, dude, have you tried napping recently?
What you do
And he did it
is
again. He did it again with Ben Fields and Dan in the boat when we were filming Dan's Pain. And he hooked and landed a 60-pound rooster. I mean, a slob of a trophy rooster. And my favorite part is he has this high-pitched giggle the entire time because he's got away with murder. He didn't deserve the fish, and he got it, and he knew everybody. Like, and my favorite part is actually Dan and Ben are wheezing in the background. There's this really shaky clip I put in Dan's Pain, and they're just all wheezing and giggling like a bunch of little boys because they're all just like, this is dumb, this is unfair. Why Kai? But of course it's Kai. And I just to kind of again back up what you're saying, Brad, like that's what's special is to be able to do this with guys over a decade. And to put that on film and to enjoy it and just to kind of let it be what it is.
Love it. I love it.
Switching gears just a little bit. We we do a lot of talk on this podcast about reflection and just kind of experiencing the outdoors, and have a lot of people on here, and we talk about faith, we talk about things of that nature. So spending so much time on the water, I mean, you guys are spending hours and hours doing these filming, and you're not just filming every time that you go fishing either. I mean, you guys are actual fishermen who actually enjoy the sport, not just to be caught on camera. But as you reflect on your experiences, have you seen, or are there examples where you've seen God's truth or beauty or goodness in the outdoors through some of these experiences?
Yeah. Yeah. Countless times. I mean, it's one of those things you think about and somebody tells you a story like, oh, I'm looking at the sunrise and just kind of reflecting for a second. But you get out to a place like that and, it happens. Kind of sometimes when you don't really expect it. I think you kind of plan on that to happen sometimes and then it doesn't. And you're like, well, day's over. And then, next morning I just, maybe decide to wake up. For some reason, I woke up at like 5 a.m. one day. I'm like, why am I awake at 5? I don't fish till 8. Just walked outside, picked up a cup of coffee, sat down, sitting outside of the front of our house. This was in Mexico, not even, planning on fishing because we're not fishing till 8. And all of a sudden I catch something out of the corner of my eye. What's that? Kind of like I've seen something before. And then I saw it again. I'm like, the rolling tarpon right there. And the sun started to come up, and then all of a sudden these fish just start rolling. We just got 5, 6, 7, 8 fish start rolling. Tarpon, I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, this is just the craziest thing because you're not expecting it, and you just get hit with that all of a sudden on your back door. And I'm like, okay, first of all, relax. Second of all, appreciate this for a second. And then just being there by yourself, kind of taking it all in. And then, of course, the next morning, I'm going to go try to do that again. But yeah, taking those
you want to repeat that, put that on repeat.
Yes, let's do that again. Let's do that again. So just little moments like that, like I said, when you're not expecting it, for me, that's kind of been the cool thing, you know. This it happens on multiple trips, but definitely being, in nature like that brings you closer to God, and it's just cool to see how it can hit you at different times when you're not expecting it, and being there with all your closest buddies is a cool thing to do and experience that with.
Yeah,
Very
and I'll
cool.
just kind of compliment George here that like even on our very first trip when we were very, very young and too young to be traveling, to be quite honest, um, he's always been really good at that reflection piece, and he always set aside time to reflect and find peace and space and things like that. And so that's something I've always been challenged to do. Now, I will be the Debbie Downer here and say I'm not very good at it. I
Mm.
am way too wound up and trying to do too many things on too many times, and George has been a nice, gentle rebuke many times to be like, "Hey, man, slow down and enjoy it." But
Mm.
my mind is just a hamster wheel that's spinning at the speed of light. Um, and I want to soak it all up and capture it on camera and experience it myself and all this kind of stuff. So, to be fully and brutally honest, I'm very bad at that. I don't do it well. I think the moments I typically find the outdoors where I feel kind of the Holy Spirit descending or being there in that moment is just when you feel small, when
Mm.
you're reminded how tiny you are and how
Mm-hmm.
significant you are and how I know I sound like a Calvinist right now, but like just very like very tiny in the world, and insignificant, and just reminded kind of who you are, right? Um, kind of like David's reflections in the Psalm, like, who are who am I, right? That I would be, second to the heavenly beings, and those moments where you get to experience the Psalm in the outdoors, I think that's what keeps us coming back, from a spiritual level. But I will be honest, they are few and fleeting for me, just because of how wired up I am about it. And that's a consequence of kind of what we do. Well, excuse me, what I do.
Mm.
George does this well, and I want to give that compliment. I'm not painting with the broad brushstroke. I do this poorly. But at the same point, I will say I strongly believe that like there are opportunities that God puts on the table for you, and I'd never feel good turning those down. I believe that God's sovereign and that even if I did, I can't thwart his plans. But I mean there was a time where we did it's a film we shot. It's not finished. Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna spike my blood pressure thinking about how not done it is. But we had the opportunity of bringing my cousin who I grew up fishing with and my brother down to Louisiana Marsh because that's where my grandfather died in a car wreck on his way back
Mm.
from Louisiana Marsh when I was young, and we wanted to do a deep reflection on what it means to rest well, because my grandfather integrated the schools in Mississippi when it was not very popular in the 1970s to do that.
Wow.
He did a lot of work on partnering with communities to try to make that transition smooth, and it allowed me to just kind of enrich what it means to do good work, to do hard work, and what it means to truly have Sabbath rest,
Mm.
which is what my grandfather did. And so, there's a weird tension there that I don't know if anybody can swallow. Sorry, my dog. I sure can't. I can't swallow that tension that like I slept 3 hours every night that trip because I was so focused on shooting it. Yeah,
Mm.
losing sleep to shoot a film about rest. That's probably me in a nutshell. Um, but it's just such a powerful opportunity, right? To shoot that, to share that, and talk about, my grandfather's legacy through the lens of Louisiana redfish. So, yeah, again, I'm just gonna kind of end it on a mealy mouth like note about just like I don't do I don't find a lot of quiet time sometimes in the outdoors, and that's because I'm so amped to be there.
Yeah.
You could
Man,
say it's gratitude. It is gratitude. I'm so amped to be there and to drain every juice from the experience. But if you want to talk about resting and finding solace and you're seeing God's spirit there, you need to talk to the other guy on the screen right there. He's the pro at it. The best I ever did was when we were in Panama and we were in a tent. I had a headlamp and I opened the Psalms and got to read the Psalms to the jungle going to sleep. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like
mm.
that was a memorable experience. And then like it was only fitting. Like I shine my headlamp up in there, and there's like a spider the size of my face on the tent. I'm like, oh, all right, quiet time's over. It's time to go to bed.
Time to go to bed.
Oh, Satan's spawn is on the top of the tent,
Hey,
but
yeah, evil wanted to take me out of my
Sour
quiet
piece.
time, and he won that time.
not today, Satan.
Uh,
Oh man, yeah, I think you guys do a phenomenal job though at capturing the beauty of nature in your films, and the beauty of God's creation is on full display in a lot of your films. You know, these aerial shots that you guys will capture are just astounding, and to me, you know, that's an extreme gift, because often, you know, that was the one thing from the little YouTube film that we did with the guys that we worked with. It was the first time that I've ever gone, you know, most of the time you'll say, you know, I do missions is one of the big things that I do at my church, and we'll go on mission trips and we'll take pictures and we'll take video. And, you know, man, you know, everybody kind of gives this excuse. The photo doesn't do justice, or the video doesn't do what I experienced justice. But that our little experience, that was the first time where I thought, man, that actually does do it justice. That is kind of how I felt. I don't know if you guys have experienced that, but there's been many times when I've watched, you know, y'all's films and I thought, gosh, that is beautiful. You know, and maybe it was more beautiful in person, but it certainly is captured on film when you guys have, you know, have done it.
Well, you're
It's
inspiring me, man, because there's a film that George and I've talked about. I don't think it would work well in any of the film tour audiences because I think it can sound a little conceited, but it's all the things you miss on the fishing trips.
yeah, no,
Um
I like that.
and like my brother, George and I giggle about this. He's headlong into birding now, but he went to Colombia recently with a work trip and has all this beautiful bird footage. And he's like, "What can you do with it?" And I'm like, "That film about, over focusing on the fishing and like I said, like you're saying, really, lean into that drone videography, lean into those really cool. Be like, we got some good. You remember that, George? In Colombia, we got dolphin footage, and we're like, this is cooler than fish footage. But then, like the F3T is like, this is not that. We
Boo, boo.
this is not a dolphin film, and I'm like, but come on. It was because it was the spinner dolphins, and we are shooting in slow mo, and we
Oh
are just kind
yeah,
of
that's
like,
incredible.
There's
we're just
some
like
mountains.
rewatch. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
anyways, I'm glad you brought that up, Brad, because that's one we have one to do. I think it's going to be a hard. We will have to write that one, and it's a hard one to write because you're basically admitting that you're bad at enjoying fishing trips, and that sounds really, I don't know, sounds a little
Well,
conceited, but it's just
you know, I think that's anybody
Yeah.
in anything, the process of the mundane processes of things we overlook as important.
hmm,
And there is, you know, there's no Eugene Peterson talks about there's no place without the potential for unearthing holiness. You know, and that's one of the things. There's a great book of liturgies called Every Moment Holy by a guy named what's his name? Doug McKelvey. Is that how you say his last name,
Yeah.
Brian?
Yeah.
And it's Every Moment Holy, and it's full of these liturgies of these kind of, you know, mundane tasks that he beautifully writes in them a prayer to, like I've got actually a print over where my coffee's station is in my home, and it's a liturgy of the morning coffee. It is beautiful, and it takes the most mundane moment of making coffee and turns it into like a moment of holiness. And I think there are moments of holiness and beauty, you know, in our fishing trips that we do just kind of go past as normal. And I think large in part it's our surroundings that we kind of you know, overlook. And I'm as bad about it, but I've certainly gotten better as I've gotten older to pause and go, gosh, look at that. That is really, really cool. Like this season is the first season I've ever duck hunted, and
you and me. Oh gosh, we're going to derail the conversation here.
oh yeah,
I'm
well
I'm
maybe
waking up
that's
at
an
4 tomorrow to do it again.
episode 2. Yeah, there's a whole new threshold for what early is, and somebody's like, we're gonna meet early. I'm like, we're gonna
Right.
meet duck hunting early, or we're gonna meet normal early.
See, I got that fro preparation because we, have a 10-month-old, so I
Oh
still
yeah,
got those
yeah, you're
newborn
good. You're
jitters.
good. You're good.
Yeah, I was ready.
But you know, just pausing to kind of take it all in, and so I'm glad I'm doing that now versus when I was younger, when I would have just like blown right by it to the shooting part.
Right.
You know, but now I'm slowing down to pause and take in, you know, the little things and see, gosh, there's some goodness there, and just kind of savor it. for a moment. And maybe age does that to us, you know, and
Mm.
maybe the process, you know, like you guys talking, I think it's a beautiful process of what you've learned in filmmaking is you've you've distilled what you know, what you guys believe is a good story. And when you get there, you got your plan, but then you see, oh, that's it. There it is.
Mm.
Because your filter's refined through this process of being able to go, all right, that's the story. There it is. That feeling that I just felt when, you know, somebody said something, that's the story that we're going to film. Not the one we came with, but that there it is. And so through that process you've developed, and I think, you know, as we get older, we learn how to slow down. I think you'll get better than at finding those moments of reflection and going, oh, there's some good truth in that. Boy, that's an analogy. I find myself going all the time. You know, I'm around a bunch of preachers all the time, and so I'll hear, oh man, that'll preach. You know, there's a sermon illustration right there if I've ever heard it. Like we were at this, we do this men's retreat up in Linden, Alabama, at a place called the Soggy Bottom Lodge, just an unbelievable lodge. And we were there with our men's retreat. It was before hunting season, and case in point, right here, the guy running the lodge says, "Hey man, you guys be careful. We released a bunch of young bucks, and they're just wandering around, and they have no idea what they're doing." I was like, "Boy, if that ain't a sermon, I don't know what is. A bunch of young bucks wandering around, don't know what to do."
That'll preach.
And so, like, kind of keeping your ears attuned to those moments of like reflection, going, "Oh gosh, yeah, that helps me understand this so much better."
You know, and I think, Ben, I can relate to what you're saying. Um, you know, and it's taken me, you know, we talk about reflection, we talk about rest, we talk about all these different things. And, you know, you and I and Brad have had these other conversations about, you know, solitude, you know, all of these are spiritual disciplines. Well, we're asked, you know, we're encouraged to do these spiritual disciplines because they have to be disciplined. They're not something, they don't come naturally, you know. So we have to discipline ourselves to do these things. We have to train ourselves to do these things. So George waking up at 5 a.m., I want to be like George. I want to do that. I want to make that more intentional rather than it just being, you know, an accident. You know, I found myself a few times sitting on the side of the river after catching a lot of trout, catching a lot of bass, catching whatever it is. And it's like, you know what? I don't want to forget this moment. So let me sit down. I want to, I want to remember this rather than making that next cast. And so, you know, that's discipline for me because, you know, I could sit there and cast all day long, but it's like, you know what? There's something else here that I want to remember rather than watching that, you know, top water float down the river one more time, you know? So I think that the more we're attuned to these ideas that, you know what, this is going to take a little work. It's not going to come naturally at first, but the thing about being disciplined to train yourself to do that, it will eventually come natural because you're retraining your mind, you're retraining your habits to do these things, to think about these things, and to think at a deeper level. It's like, okay, God, what are you doing? You know, I want to be where you are. I want to see the things that you're seeing and things that bring you joy. Uh, so I can relate to what you're saying, Ben, because it's taken me a long time to stop and, you know, make myself reflect. But I've enjoyed the times that I do show a little bit of discipline in that area.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you're saying about solitude because I think one of the things that has always been impressed upon me is that, you know, whenever Christ was doing something major in his ministry, he was in a desolate place or in solitude, you know. But there was, you know, that was always what preempted the next move. Um, yeah, to your point, it is a spiritual discipline, and it's one. I think it's funny. I practice better outside of the outdoors. I don't That's so off brand for your podcast, so I apologize. But I'm just being honest. Yeah, I think I'm just a little too much like a kid on Christmas morning when I'm in the outdoors. But outside of that, yeah, that solitude, especially in a society that wants us always wired, always on, um, it's an essential part of being engaged with your friends and family. It's an essential part of being engaged, kind of where you've been placed in your domain, and it's essential to to be able to meet with the Father, right?
Mm.
If it's always loud, you can't hear anything. So,
That's
but yeah,
good.
it's funny to me that yeah, you would think the one place where I'd be really good at that is the outdoors, and it's not.
Mm.
But I will get better someday.
That's good.
Love that.
Something I've been Brian and I've been talking about as we've been recording new episodes for this new season that we're currently recording for season 8. Can't believe that, but we're in the
Congrats,
midst
y'all.
of season 8, and something that whenever we're talking to guys, that obviously we respect because we've invited them into this conversation, and we respect you guys, and I'm fascinated to ask the question. As much has been made of sort of manhood and masculinity of late, and so I'd really love to hear what's important to you guys to understand as what do you think makes a man?
I've got a cheat sheet because I'm going through a discipleship process and it's been beat through my head. So George, I'll give you some time to chew. Um, for me, to kind of step up as a man is to engage your world with strength and love. And
Mm,
what I typically see is men are either strong-footed or one or the other, right? You're either very strong and domineering and pushing everybody down because you're the man. And that's kind of the Hollywood masculinity, the
right.
Marlboro man, John Wayne, all that, like I'm tough and nobody can touch me. Um, and then the other side is love, and you could almost see an overcorrection there, and I think about it, it was visually displayed to me of like if you think about um two gullies on the side of a road, and one is domineering and one is withdrawing, you want to be on the highway in the middle, and that takes balance because all we're going to do is ping pong back and forth. And so for me, masculinity is that. One, am I engaged? I think as much as our culture is just so always on and 5,000 things going on, it's actually really easy to be disengaged.
Mm.
Mm,
It's really, really easy. I mean, that's the thing I notice with my kids. It's so easy to disengage with them. Um, it's a silly thing, but like I don't have a phone charger in my room anymore because I want my phone to be charged in the morning and evenings when I need to be spending time with my kids. Um,
I like that.
and
mm,
well, don't clap because it sometimes doesn't work. You know the chaos of little ones. I have a 4-year-old and a 10-month old. So, but that's what I'm saying is that like trying to set myself up for success to be engaged. But that's for me. That's step one as a man. I don't think being a man is being out of touch and mean and cruel or loving and caring, but you're not engaged with your family and the people around you. Like that's a non-starter. But then, like I said, um, being able to be in the world with equal parts strength and love, I think is I think that's to me that's what
that's
the
good.
core of masculinity is. And when you start to tilt off kilter either way, that's when we're in trouble.
Mm.
Um, and
You
and I,
can't.
and I and I worry a lot these days because I think we idolize both ends of the spectrum.
Mm.
Um, a loving bimbo husband that you see on sitcoms who have no spine and no ability to protect and provide for their families. But then at the same point, there's also this like cosplay stuff that you see online of like basically pseudo military stuff where it's like all strength and they're just going to beat the crap out of you until you're a tough man. And it's just like that seems problematic as well.
Mm.
So for me, there's a balance there. Balance is hard.
Yeah, I can't
But it's
remember who it was. It's either Calvin or Luther that he articulates it as sort of like the proverbial drunk man on a horse. If he leans too far either way, he's going to fall off the
Mm.
horse,
no.
and it's a tough balance. But that's
Yeah,
good. I appreciate that, Ben. Thanks for answering that, man.
yeah, yeah, man.
Yeah, I mean, for me, a little bit different end of the spectrum. I'm, 30, about to be 34, still single, no kids, no wife yet. So definitely a different perspective, in my life, but have all my friends, having kids and seeing them with their significant others and kiddos, like it lets you see kind of what that model, what you want to be one day. If you get to that point. And I think for me, just looking at different perspectives of people and then being able to take bits and pieces of that and kind of make it to what I think it should be. especially in this, super egotistical world we have, especially in the outdoor space. I mean, kill the biggest buck, catch the biggest fish. Everybody's just flexing on social media, trying to be the big man. But end of the day, I think taking a step back, putting the ego aside, and being able to give back in any way you can, and say, instead of saying, how can I serve myself today, and I want to go catch a grand slam today, how can I help my friends, how can I help others, how can I give back, without focusing just on serving myself first and then serving others, but trying to reverse that a little bit, being able to take the step back, even knowing that maybe you did something that potentially helped somebody out, and say, hey, I did that, instead of taking that, gratification of that happened because of me. It's like, hey, give this person the credit, take a step back, don't say a word, even though you may have had credit for it. Put that ego aside, let somebody have that win, and just, that feeling at the end of the day is much better than you trying to say, oh well, yeah, I did this too though, but I helped there. Just stepping back from that, putting ego aside completely.
Man, that's good.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I mean, I think it's good for us to talk about that and have the courage to speak about that into this space and into this conversation, because the more that we share about that, I think the more those behind us will hear. And there's a good opportunity for us to shape what manhood looks like going forward in this conversation. And so, man, I love that. I like that a lot, man.
Yeah, George. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about that too. It's like I feel like there's this alpha myth that's out there.
Alpha myth.
I love it, man. Make a bumper sticker.
And
Sasquatch. I mean, what?
And you think about, if someone is truly like the alpha, Jesus he calls himself the alpha and the omega. What was Jesus known for? It was putting others' needs before himself. It was serving others, loving others. It's this whole others focused mentality that is completely lost in every conversation, that the secular version of masculinity. And I love that. Thanks for bringing that to the table.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's one of those things that's much easier said than done, because at the end of the day, we are men. We want to kind of say, oh yeah, I did this, and
Yeah.
show them you conquered something or accomplished something. But being able to take that step back is definitely easier said than done. Something I'm constantly working on, myself.
Aren't we all? I mean, we're always trying to just continually improve,
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think any of us have ever, what? I got it. I figured it out. I'm there. I've arrived.
So now you're not trying hard enough, right?
No, right. So what's next? I mean, we always ask our guests, what's your next adventure? And you guys have like legit adventures. I mean, I want to hear what's next for you guys, or for Dorsal, or what's on the horizon.
I'm gonna tee it up for our chief dreaming officer, George Constantine.
Chief dreaming officer. I like that title.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
What are we doing, George? Speak it into existence.
That's right. Still plenty of time to change.
These guys are not naming and claiming theologians, but you can have a little fun.
There you go. Do it.
You've been spending too much time in South America.
That's right. Yeah, what is it? One time we had a trip completely booked, and then I saw a magazine cover, and I was like, hey, man, quick question. Thoughts on going to Panama and kayak fishing? And 2 weeks later, we changed our trip plans completely and did that.
Yeah, I think we had not booked flights, but everything else was penciled in. I was like, okay, let's get to booking. And George was like, so
what do you think about?
And it was a magical experience. We did this trip that's cheaper than a domestic trip, and we were kayaking the coast of Panama. Talk about a trip there, guys, where it was not really quantity or quality focused, but experientially absolutely rich.
Wow.
I can't tell you how many fish we caught, because I don't think it was a lot. But it was just such an adventure and such a blessing. And I'm a biology nerd. I just loved it. I mean, we got to see a toucan. At that point, we saw a toucan at breakfast, and I was like, I don't care if we catch fish. Like, I'm done.
My life is complete. I've seen a toucan.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's the truth. I was just like, this is too cool.
I'm there with you.
I love your cereal,
George,
man.
George,
I love you.
You're skipping the question, George. Where are we going this year, man?
Yeah. Circling back. Hey, we're actually still working on plans right now. I think there's always 3 or 4 different ideas, projects, trips we want to take at any given time, and kind of honing down on the one that makes the most sense, that's most realistic, that I guess keeps relationships together and families happy and everybody really in a good spot comes into play a little bit.
Just
So
trying to stay on
No,
the
us
old
married guys
horse.
always lead with some really strong negotiation. Like, where are y'all going this year? North Korea. What? All right, it's not North Korea. Hear me
just
out. It's
kidding.
Cuba.
Just Colombia.
Got to just set the bar low.
Yep. So next on the docket, for me personally, actually next month, my birthday, I'm actually taking my dad, one of his buddies, down to Louisiana to take them to Louisiana for the first time. So a couple
Awesome.
spin rod
It's
guys
gonna be a
going.
riot. I'm so excited.
That's going to be an adventure in itself.
I want to FaceTime for that.
Yes.
Stream it.
Yeah, exactly. So that'll be
Hey,
cool
if
to
you've
do.
watched Alabama football, you have seen George's dad on television. He is that man is larger than life, and putting him in a skiff is going to confine that, and there's going to be a lot of energy, and I'm so excited to see
It's
it.
going to be a lot. It'll
Oh
be fun though.
man.
But yeah, no, I think
great.
next for us looking at some future film projects down the road, and then I think what we try to do is always have that one trip, and I think we've talked about this before, but since '08, I guess was our first trip out of the country, and kind of made that pact of, hey, let's stick this group together. We're gonna make a trip happen 1 week out of the year, no matter what, kids, wives, jobs, anything. It's 5 days, we can make it happen. We just gotta stick to our guns on it, and we've been able to do that, for the
That's
last
great.
16, 17. So that's a tradition we want to keep going regardless of all this film stuff and projects. I think that's kind of how we stay hold of ourselves and stick to that original pack and never let some film uh, whatever you want to call it, limelight or project, whatever, to get in the way of that just true trip and having that time with our buddies. So I think that's one thing we
Yeah.
want to focus on, because there's always gonna be times to make different project, different film work, but
Yeah.
Yeah, we had the freedom last year of like our, our core
yeah.
trip didn't have to do with any core like festival or anything. It was just like, and that's what we did. We shot a series that we thought was interesting, entertaining, and time will tell if other people agree. But
Love it.
that was kind of what we do. So ripping off of George, the film projects I think we're excited about. We get plans in the work to shoot a sequel of Dan's Pain 2, and 3 if Dan is cursed as much as we think he is. So I'm excited about that because Dan is such a good sport, man. I don't know many people in fly fishing who are like, you know what, make fun of me. Come on. Not once, but twice. But and Dan's he just rolls with it. I love it. You've seen my dog poking around the corner. Had a crazy idea because my dog once chased down a bunch of fireworks. He's a yellow lab, and I was like, oh my gosh, I bet he would have been a really good duck dog. And then one of George and I's buddies, his name's Kyle, he was like, dude, you should try it. You should take Regan's duck hunting. And I was like, well, no duck hunter is going to take me hunting. And he's like, I'll be your Huckleberry. So we've done it a couple times, and I mean, from like you're saying, Brad, from like gun training to everything. There he is right there. That's Riggins. Has passed with flying colors. So
Yeah.
so we're gonna round out and see if we can't get Riggins.
I love that reel. The reel you did was hilarious.
Thank you.
Like,
He's a
it was
hoot. I mean, he
great.
really is he's a goofball. And I think that film, it really is going to be about Riggins, and I think realistically, I'm gonna be going tomorrow morning, and my plan is if I miss a bird, I'm going to stop shooting and I'm going to let Kyle shoot, because it's about Riggins, it's not about me. That's not I'm not that interesting of a character. I think Riggins is, and so it'll be a dog film about
Boy,
hunting, which I
people
think
love some dogs, boy.
they do, and I hope they love my dog because he's just a goofball. Like he's not like elite and trained and focused. Like the dude is just goofy, but he's a sweet dog. So we've got that. We've got the film about my grandfather that I think is really important, really special. I don't think that'll be a festival film because it's longer form.
Looking forward to that, man.
Yeah, yeah. And then like I said, I would love to start to tell more. I think like when George and I meet people and we like see their character and they have stories, we just kind of start to latch onto that. And I think I want to do more like people stories that are in the outdoors. Because
Yeah.
I think then instead of being like, oh, we've got to hook a 400,000 pound tuna on a fly and show it off, instead it's just like, let's follow this person's character development and let them tell the story. And we met someone on a recent trip who was an ex-Marine and the military, and now does sea turtle conservation and tries to protect sea turtles from jaguars. And I was like, yes, whoa, okay, that's a story.
Didn't see
Um,
that coming.
yeah, yeah, it was just like there's
Yeah.
14 plot twists, and like when I tried to put it into a promo reel, I was like, I can't fit all these in
I
there.
ain't that
So
great at geometry, but there's a little more than a triangle in that story.
it's like
Octagon.
it's an alligator's back, right? You know, like that many
That's
triangles.
awesome.
But yeah, I just think those are some of the stories we have coming down the pipe, that we hope that we can afford to do, that we
Mhm.
can uh the the adrenaline in their veins that are like, hey, can I go shoot some stuff? So Ben Fields, who like I just want to give him another 4,000 shout outs.
Mhm.
He taught us how to do this. He talking about what George says, what it means to be a man, to give stuff away. Ben Fields gave away gobs of hours to me to teach me how to edit and teach us how to
That's
film and
awesome.
how to like don't get this camera get like Ben brought out the best and worst of us in a wonderful way of like, you don't need a cinema camera, you need this camera,
Mm.
and then you need this camera and this camera um
That's great.
and it's
Love
just
that.
been a sweet relationship. But he and his wife are on going on an anniversary trip, and they're um rooftop camp, whatever you call that, like overlanding, whatever you have the camping roof or
Oh
tent
yeah, yeah, yeah.
on a van in Costa Rica, because they're just way more rad than any of us, and that's what they want to do for their anniversary. But he was like, hey, can I shoot some stuff from Dorsal? I want to go and try to catch Costa Rican rainbow trout in the cloud forest. And I was like, yeah, like let's go.
Didn't know
And
that was a thing.
oh, dude, it is a thing. It's very intriguing. And my favorite part though is like, and this is where like as storytellers, you'll probably enjoy this. He goes, but the story I want to tell is like showing my wife why I love fly fishing. And I think there's no better context than to do it in a cloud rainforest while we're overlanding and say, like, hey, I want to show you why this is special. And I'm like, that's the story.
That
That's it.
tracks.
So yeah,
Love it.
do it. So anyway, so those are the stories we got coming down the pipe. Um, those are all ones that just crank our tractors, get excited. I'm more excited than all of those if George can document his dad and all of his tomfoolery on his boat. I think that'll be the funniest film we've ever put together. Um, so yeah, we just got a lot of fun stuff.
I
And
love it,
just not
man.
enough hours in the day, man. I think God has cursed us by putting 24 hours and not 48. I've been begging for 48 for years now, and the last I checked, it's only 24.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's enough. It's enough. Well, gosh, man, I really have enjoyed this conversation. How, guys, how can people support Dorsal Outdoors?
Um, this is gonna be a weird one, so George, I apologize.
Fire away.
Kind feedback. Man, there's not a drug strong enough,
Mhm.
because I don't think George and I are ego driven to know our films resonate. Like Brad, you telling me today that you've watched some of our films multiple times, I'm like, wow. You know, we just never get that feedback. And so
Yeah.
I'm not begging for likes and comments and all those silly things. It's just like, if and actually let me step back a second. If you ever encounter a piece on social media or on YouTube or at a film festival, and it does something for your soul, and it's not our film, please contact that filmmaker. Write him an
Yeah.
email, send him a DM and say, hey man, I watched your film. It means a lot. Probably the best feedback we've ever gotten is one guy found us on Instagram, said, hey, I watched your film about Tommy who lost his uncle to cancer, and I just want you to know that I want to be like his uncle. I want that's who he has emblemized what I want to be as a man. And like to
Wow.
me, that was the best feedback we ever got.
Yeah,
Because one, I also
absolutely.
know that the guy like he went from YouTube to try to track us down on social media and try to write us a message. And so the effort he went to say that spoke almost as loud as the words. But
Mm.
um, yeah, that's the easiest way to support. We don't have a merch shop yet. We don't have all the other trimmings that are pretty typical these days. Maybe one day, but dude, good feedback, kind feedback, even like inspiration feedback, like, hey, I know somebody who needs their story told.
Yeah.
All that is winning in our sales. So, George, if you want to add anything to that, that's just I hope that doesn't come across as like a teenage boy asking for affirmation. It's not that. It's just the knowledge of
No.
knowing that your films resonate.
Mhm.
It's not a luxury we have. It's just we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that statement. I mean, getting 50,000 followers on Instagram is not going to just make us smile and happy. It's about, like what Ben said, having those comments of people who are actually like, you know what, that's pretty cool, and I appreciate y'all doing that. It's like, hey, I'm glad we were able to tell the story and somebody else's story potentially, but glad it resonated, and just be able to do things like that, I think is huge for us. And end of the day, I don't think me and Ben are expecting to retire off of dorsal funds by any means, but it's been a fun side gig for us, and we enjoy the hell of it every day that we do it, and we're blessed to do it. So I'm glad that people seem to enjoy it, and want to just kind of keep that train going.
Well, I can't wait to see what's next, and I really love what you guys do. So glad to call you friends, and can't wait to hang out a little bit. Maybe get around that campfire over behind Ben right there.
It's always open, man. It'll chew up firewood, so bring a lot, okay?
Bring a lot.
I've got
I
one in
know
my
a guy.
backyard. It burns some wood.
It's efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I tell you, storytelling and, the creativity that you guys display, I think is a reflection of God. We talked about how we can see God's truth and His beauty and His goodness in the outdoors. I think in the work that you guys do as creativity is a reflection of God as creator.
Hmm.
And when we're making, Paul talks about let us do all things unto the Lord, and do them as you do them unto the Lord. And you guys do with excellence. Your films are excellently shot and your stories are excellently captured, and that is as unto the Lord. And for me, I think that's a great testament of beautiful art is great worship, and beautiful creativity is honoring God well. And man, I see that in your work, and I really have enjoyed getting to know y'all, because that makes them even better, is because you guys are just real dudes, and man, you're having a great time and you're enjoying yourself, and you don't take yourself too seriously, and that makes those films all the better. I hope people that listen to this, will go to YouTube to search Dorsal Outdoors and just take in these films, because they really are fun. They're really encouraging. They're challenging. They're beautiful. If you like to see fish, man, you guys do a great job capturing them. And like I agree with what you said about like hearing feedback is so good, because we feel that with the podcast is like, how can you help this podcast? Man, leave a comment, like help us on iTunes, leave us a review. You want to help us out, man, let us know how it's going. Join the conversation, because that's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And let us interact with one another. And that's where the richness is. That's where the encouragement is. And man, I love that. So I hope people take you up on that. And I'll certainly try to be better as a consumer to say appreciative things to those that are makers, because as an artist, I get that, as a songwriter, and when somebody says, hey man, your song really impacted me, that's better than any dollar you make off of something. Is like, man, somebody their heart was impacted and encouraged by something that I made. Well, then that's us being who we were made to be as co-creators of living out as God's creation, that we too are creators, and then He enjoys making so that we can enjoy Him forever. And so we enjoy making as well, so that others may enjoy what we've made. And so, man, you guys do that well, and I'm thankful for man, just this conversation and the opportunity to go a little bit deeper with you guys. I appreciate you sharing your time and staying up a little bit later, and even though you got a duck hunt coming in the morning. And man,
No, man, thank you so
again.
much for the kind words. I mean, it really, that in itself is worth $1 million to George and I, just because, yeah, it's great to know that our films resonate, but also that you're honoring the vessels that we are in, and obviously the potter that made us. So that's a wonderful reflection, and I think that's something George and I have also started to think about like not just films for fun, but also like these as a reflection of opportunity, um, and of I don't know, like we've been given. I guess now, if I'm not trying to sound haughty, like we've been given a gift, and that's for ours to use, and so. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I hope we do that well, and we will continue to try to do that well. And like there'll be plenty of fun stuff, like for sure. Um, but also using that opportunity well is, I think, really important to us, because at first it was like, is this a thing? Is this a thing? And now it's like, okay, this is a thing, and I want to use it wisely. So thank you for that.
Steward it well. Yeah, man. Well, keep up
Steward
the
is the
great
word,
work.
man.
Keep up the great work.
You talk about stewardship in the outdoors. We think a lot about stewardship and the stuff we're doing. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, what you guys are doing is incredible too. And you've made again huge strides, obviously, like y'all talked about being season 8 now. It's incredible. And y'all interviewed some amazing people and that we don't even, stand next to. So that's awesome that you guys invited us on. We appreciate it. Thank you for, doing what you guys do. It's been awesome to watch and see you guys grow too. So thank you.
Well, it's so fun to shine the light on, we touched on it earlier, but how great the community is.
Oh yeah.
In the outdoor space, this little sub community of fly fishermen in the state of Alabama. It's been fun to kind of put a spotlight on that and go, man, there's some great people around and part of this community. And so we've been fortunate to have a lot of them a part of this conversation and open people's eyes up to all the people all over the state doing cool things and sharing life and sharing fly fishing together. And they're not hiding, what they have, but they're sharing it and say, hey, let's go fish together, man. What are you doing? Where are you going? Let's go together. Let's hang out. And man, some great people all over the state, and we've been, man, I'm so thankful to have had them, and we can continue to look for those stories and those people to add their voice to this conversation. We hope, because what we do is we say every time we want to close, because we hope this conversation, we hope your films will encourage people and challenge people to write their own stories, share their own adventures in the place we love to call the storied outdoors.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take some time to leave us a review, or better yet, share it with a friend. We hope these stories encourage you to write your own stories and share your own adventures in the storied outdoors.